Hello, I'm Dapper Dan Gavoston, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, including the annuals, which definitely count.
And I'm Mischievous Mark Ginocchio, and I too own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, but then the annuals don't count.
Well, welcome everybody to the Amazing Spider Talk, the show where two fans and collectors uncover the strange, fun, and fascinating history of the Spider-Man comic universe. Thanks for joining us for this special review episode of the Amazing Spider Talk.
Today on the show, Dan and I are going to be discussing Amazing Spider-Man Volume 5, number 56, Legacy number 857, which was written by Nick Spencer, with pencils by Mark Bagley, inks by Andrew Hennessy and John Dell, colors by Edgar Delgado and Rachel Rosenberg, and letters by VC's Joe Caramagna. Did I say that right?
I don't know anymore.
Yeah, we're going back and forth on that lately. And a cover by Mark Bagley, John Dell, and Edgar Delgado. This issue was first released in comic book stores on January 6, 2021.
All right, it's a new year, and we got some new comics to talk about. So this is Amazing Spider-Man 56. It is the fallout, or at least it says it's the fallout to the Last Remains storyline, or the post mortem, as it says on here. And mortem makes me think of death. So this is like breaking down this thing after it died, and I think that's kind of how
Yeah,
we felt about the end of this story.
well, it's funny. Usually there's fallout after something kind of ends definitively, and I would say that Last Remains did not really end definitively in any sense of the word. But hey, we're still talking about this storyline with Kindred and Norman Osborn, and now Wilson Fisk. A lot of pieces to in this story. Don't know if they all fit together, but hey, let's talk comics, Dan. Let's just why don't we just get right into it?
Well, sure. So one of the funny things I think about this issue is that it's this larger issue than standard. I think it's like about 40 pages. And there's a lot of content in here. Your feelings on it might vary. What's interesting to me is the structure of this story. It's very much a story told from Norman Osborn's point of view. He's the protagonist in this particular issue, and we get like a flashback to the events from, well, not the previous issue, what transpired between the start of this issue and the end of the last issue. And with some other kind of flashbacks mixed in here and there that we'll talk about. And what immediately struck me was that, in my mind, I imagined that this issue was intended to be a story of, Norman Osborn dealing with Kindred back at Fisk's lair, and that being the actual fallout. Because like most of the story is actually fallout to the events of Last Remains. If you take that like middle chapter of this issue, the kind of look back at how Last Remains and the events in Kindred's lair, finished up. And so I wonder if that all of that content was intended to be included in the Last Remains storyline, but it wasn't able to fit in, or maybe an art schedule got shifted around, and suddenly it got shoved into this issue, and now we've got this pregnant issue that is supposed to be a fallout, but also acts as kind of semi end of the chapter. That's at least like my interpretation of it from reading it.
I mean, that's probably an accurate interpretation, but again, I guess my response to that would be, even if these events that felt kind of, I don't want to say shoehorned in, but kind of, like you said, kind of packed into this issue, even if they were used more judiciously in the earlier lead up, I mean, does it still make Last Remains a full arc in terms of its narrative and the story it was trying to tell? No, because I still feel like there are just obvious questions about these characters that this storyline is just refusing to engage with. Like it's just leading it up to the reader to make wild guesses and assumptions based on a line here or there. And I don't know, like at this point we've been doing this for 56 issues. Like it's a tiresome game. So like yeah, I mean you can talk about how if this went here and that went there, like it would maybe make this issue seem a little bit more like a bow on the present. But again, like what what is last rem if you give me, what's the 3 sentence description of what last remains, what happened in last remains? Like
I think
Kindred came to Earth or whatever, and Kindred confronted Spider-Man, and while the Sin Eater was hunting Norman Osborn. I mean, what else am I supposed to take away from this story?
I guess that Kindred is Harry Osborn somehow, and he
Yeah,
and he is inflicting pain to try to get, and that's what this issue seems to want to spell out, is that like, he's inflicting pain to try to get Spider-Man and Norman Osborn to realize the thing that they did. And
right.
inherently, it's hard to get invested when we don't know why Harry is acting so out of character, how he got the powers and position that he's in, and what he cares about. And so you have this kind of like black hole of a character, and you're missing the other half of the drama other than just reacting to the way that a character is. And I think we've been hitting this really over the head. And Mark, you and I could complain, I think, again about editorial here and how things are paced,
Right.
but we would be doing that for every issue. And I think we made our point last week when we talked about the previous issue. But I do think many of the effects of, our complaints are really felt in this issue, which is like trying to move on, trying to wrap up an arc, but the pacing never gave us anything conclusive, like you're saying, to grab onto. So the fallout just feels kind of like limp, or just like another bridge to the next part of this chapter. And it's going to be hard to rile us up and get us excited again when you already had like a false climax, right? We were waiting for this climax, and it kind of just trolled us a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. But I mean, like you're right. We don't have to just keep hitting the same notes over and over again. I think we made our opinions very resoundingly clear a week ago on this show. But like okay, so let's look at some elements of 56 in just the context of the issue itself. I mean, frankly, Dan, I mean, we were talking a little bit about this offline. And in a vacuum, I found this issue to be far less enjoyable than the last one, even with all the frustrations that we expressed on our last show. I think we both made it pretty clear that we liked, in a vacuum, we liked that issue. I mean, again, we're not talking like, we're not putting it up there for worst comics ever or anything like that. But like, I didn't enjoy this and found a lot of stuff in here to be problematic, and not even just from the standard like, oh, this story is paced poorly or they're trolling us kind of a thing. Like let's start with Fisk,
Sure.
if you
Yeah,
can,
go ahead. Go
just
ahead.
because I mean, like, okay, so I guess we can't say that his involvement in this story at this point is completely out of nowhere, because I mean he has had, I mean, one very notable interaction with Kindred where he's like on bended knee asking for something, and it's clear that that what he was asking for was not honored by Kindred. And we can speculate what it is. It's probably the resurrection of Vanessa, because what else is Fisk looking for?
Right.
It just seems to be, I mean, that's inherent to his character. But then again, we don't know for sure. Fisk has been also looking for, in recent months, looking for the Lifeline tablet. I mean, so the point being is that, like, the way Fisk is portrayed in this issue, at least from my interpretation, was, he's got this like unhealthy obsession with Kindred here, and it's like Norman is kind of keeping Fisk at bay, almost, and kind of, as much as Norman hates Harry. You get the sense that Norman is also trying to protect Harry from Fisk because he knows that once Fisk gets his goons in on there, it's gonna be no holds barred for Harry, and to me it just feels completely unearned because it's like I feel like there's really been no work anywhere else in Last Remains up until the most recent issue to demonstrate Fisk's role in this at all. It feels very tacked on. Like why is he like I don't know. I mean, am I overreading this here, Dan? I mean, like I just feel like not that like it came completely out of nowhere, but it's like we're telling this is a very very emblematic example of showing and telling and not showing. Like it's just we're being told Fisk is pissed and he's coming after Harry and he wants Kindred, but like there was nothing that was shown to us as the reader for the better part of years worth of comics. So
I mean, really, the last time that we saw Fisk involved in a Kindred related thing was that Free Comic Book Day issue that kicked off Nick Spencer's run over 2 years ago. Like, that's the strongest connection that I can think of, between these two characters. And maybe you could say, like, there's something going on with Fisk and Norman appointing him at Ravencroft, which we do touch on here a little bit, like that, Norman is clearly working for Kingpin, which is a role I never expected to see Norman in, playing second fiddle to someone. But I guess he does owe him for, reinstating him in some, place of power at Ravencroft instead of, in a padded cell of his own, which is where he was after Absolute Carnage. I'm still really foggy on how one goes from thinking you're Cletus Cassidy to suddenly being in charge of Ravencroft, but I'll leave that alone. I think for me, I'm not quite as like I don't feel like Fisk's out of character here more than it is like as a story. We've been kind of going all over the place. Like we thought Kingpin's whole push was the Lifeline tablet saga, which may or may not be over. We're not really sure because it wasn't concluded in that story. It's
Right.
like a trend here. It's that these stories don't like to conclude satisfyingly or clearly. And, I could very easily suspect that the Lifeline tablet could be in some way related to whatever's going on with Kindred or Fisk's desire to resurrect Vanessa, which is our assumption. And I think we assumed that all the way back in that Free Comic Book Day issue. If I'm not correct, there was like a portrait of Vanessa that, strongly implied that. But that's asking for your audience to like even just read into that. We don't know Fisk's goal, which would be really helpful for us to get involved in the stakes for Fisk, and you're going to hear this refrain, which is we don't know what they want. So it's hard to get invested in the drama. It's being clever and interesting, so to speak, without telling a story clearly. And so we're suddenly asked to kind of like converge all of these stories with Kingpin. And it's not like he can't chew bubblegum and walk at the same time, but like it's just like all over the place. If this was his goal to get Kindred, maybe we should have seen some of that leading up to this.
Yeah, and we should have seen some of that leading up to this. But like you said, I mean, like the other problem is we don't know what Kingpin wants. We don't know what he knows. Like he keeps indicating that he knows something about Kindred. Like there's just so much subterfuge going on here. But it's not like it's one thing to kind of play a game of mystery here, but this doesn't feel like mystery. It just feels like just missing narrative. Like we forgot to tell this story, so now we're just trying to insert this thing in as if we told this story. You know what I mean? Like it's like a Jedi mind trick, except it's a really bad one, because like I'm not falling for it at all. It's like, what do you mean Fisk is all of a sudden like invested in this? Like where like you said, what are the stakes? We don't know what he wants. We don't know what he knows. It's like it's silly to pretend. And then, you know, also kind of silliness is um we get this revisit refrain to the Dark Force dimension, which is from Spencer's other magnum opus, which is Secret Empire. But then it's one of the characters that's kind of involved in creating this whole scenario is the Spot, and it's like, where the hell did he come from? Like where's the I mean, no offense to the Spot, but what's going on here?
It reminds me of the Another Way to Die storyline, where suddenly, in order to create anti-venom, or the antidote to venom was to use the character Freak from earlier in Brand New Day, and people were like, nobody cares about Freak, but I actually thought that was really cool because Freak was such a dumb villain that like
Right.
using his power in a way where he just becomes like an object. He's not even a character anymore. I was like, okay, fine. But like we've not seen the Spot, as part of this ongoing story with Spencer. And yeah, he's part of Spider-Man's rogues gallery, so you could pull him out of anywhere. But this feels as random as like the Martin Lee curing thing that happened, back during Sin's Rising. I had a suspicion that it was the Lizard who wanted to get cured. And that ended up not being the case. But, like, in terms of telling a coherent, story from one beat to the next, it makes far more sense to bring in the Lizard because that was a character who had been established as working as part of this ongoing story. Under Spencer's purview, he's not touched the Spot. So, like, to pull him out here just feels like, well, I'm just using his power for the heck of it. The same way the Juggernaut showed up for 3 panels and then we never heard from him again. I guess we kind of see a panel of him here, but he wasn't a character. He was a power set, and it just feels lame and like a kind of a cheap answer to this. I guess you could say, right, it's from Spencer's other oeuvre, and he's connecting his like world in the way that like Bendis did, but it's just not satisfying. And to me, it's just an additional wrinkle to this story that I didn't need.
Yeah. I mean, I think there might. I'm trying to think back when the Spot was first introduced, or early on in his introduction. I think it was an issue of Spectacular Spider-Man. It might have even been Spectacular 100, and I think
It
there
is, yeah.
was. I think Kingpin was involved in that story somehow. Wasn't it like a Kingpin Black Cat Spot thing? Or I'm trying to remember.
I'm pretty
Um,
sure that's correct, yeah.
so maybe this is just, another kind of habit of Spencer's, I feel, over the course of this arc, which is just him just trying to like be overly cute in all of his like deep cut references to spider history. Maybe I don't know, but like you said, it doesn't really work. Not that it not that it's bad, but it just, I don't know, like it didn't, it just feels there. Um, you know, if you're gonna do a Spot story, I'd rather see them do something like kind of like what we got during Brand New Day. I think it was a Fred Van Lente story that was kind of a fun one-off with the Spot. You know what I mean? Like this just kind of seemed, kind of meh to me.
Well,
Bringing
he's
him
not.
into
The
this.
problem is he's not interested in doing a Spot story.
Yeah,
This
well, that's
isn't a
it.
story about that character at all.
Right. Well,
I mean, the
exactly. He's just
visual of it
there.
is cool. The visual of it is cool, but like, yeah, he's just there. Like, was there a way to resolve this within the characters presented by this drama? It's like if you had like a scene from Marriage Story where the two characters are like discussing how to raise a kid, and then in the last 5 minutes, a guy with a gun shows up and kills one of them that we've never met before. You'd be like, "What story is this? Who is this guy?" Like, it just doesn't really work. So anyway, I mean,
Yeah.
again, not egregious, but like in terms of efficient storytelling, why didn't we set this up sooner?
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of going from there, let's talk a little bit about Norman here. because this was we got a swerve with Norman, and this was pretty well executed. Although I will admit, on first read, I it didn't fully land for me, and it wasn't until a conversation with you after the fact and then rereading it that it fully sank in. But it turns out, one of our complaints last week when we were talking about 55 was kind of Norman seemingly cured of being cured by the Sin Eater and storming into Kindred's lair, pumpkin bombs ablazing, back in touch with his Green Goblin side, even though he was supposedly, that was expunged from him. But it turned out that was all pretend. That he did that to kind of get closer to Harry. So, that, I guess, kind of a double swerve, if you will. So that was pretty clever. I guess it works. Although the other half of it, I wasn't, involving MJ, I wasn't too thrilled about, but we can talk about that in a second. But what was your take on kind of Norman and his characterization here?
It got me. You know what I mean? I didn't see that coming, and I was pleased by it because it was clever of Norman. I think his motivation is still a little fishy for me. If he is worried about saving Harry, which seems to be his goal here, right? He's trying to heal his family because he himself was healed, and he thanks Harry for that. He feels like that he's had this this thing that's been tormenting him taken off his back, and so he's almost wants to pay the manner forward, but also heal his family, which I totally buy. As twisted as the Green Goblin was, there was this strong family element the whole time through, whether that be legacy or how Harry's not living up to his legacy, but he was always looking for some kind of strong family connection in his own twisted way. And to see the character not influenced by the Goblin formula, and whatever seems to have cured whatever mental illness might have been there prior to the Goblin formula, I buy that the character's motivation. I don't understand why he says he wants to save Harry from wreaking vengeance and causing more destruction and harm. It seems weirdly premeditative of him, although this is the same guy that randomly showed up on the bridge that MJ was on. I really like the characterization of this new Norman, and I like that Spencer is doing things with that premise. What I find most frustrating about it is that it is the exact same arc that we got for Harry during Dan Slott's run, which is the
Right.
let's absolve the Osborne name, let's heal and be a family again. And it just kind of rings hollow on a second time around, especially because we have no idea why Harry Osborne is acting this way. So you want to root for Norman, but at the same time you have a hard time buying into the stakes of it because I just don't think Harry is acting in character.
Yeah. What good is healing the family if this isn't truly Harry, the last version of Harry we saw before Nick Spencer took over? You know what I mean? Because it's hard to view that character through the same lens right now, and rightly so, because we've also gotten no explanation as to why he's acting this way.
Yeah.
Until we get an explanation, the assumption has to be there's something not right here. You just can't. Even in comic book world, you don't generally flip that quickly and also gain demonic superpowers. There's a story there. We just haven't been told it yet.
Yeah, we saw Harry Osborn in issue 800, fine and not demonically possessed, and regaining the Osborn name to start a new legacy, which is what Norman is describing here. And then in issue 802, he's now Kindred, So
Right.
there's
Right.
some other explanation there. It's the same kind of critique that I make of The Force Awakens. I'm going to go down this road, which is
boy.
it's really hard for us to invest in defeating the First Order if we spent a whole trilogy watching these characters beat the Empire and celebrate at the end, only for the Empire seemingly to be restored with even more power than before off screen. You know what I mean? So it's like, we just got done healing Harry. Like why should we invest in re-healing him when he got unhealed off screen? You know what I
Right,
mean?
right. Yeah, but this time they got multiple ships that can destroy planet sand. So just think about that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the thing with Norman and his kind of machinations here leads to MJ here, and I'm gonna sound weird here because I'm gonna kind of complain about something that I'm not even 100% sure to myself when I'm complaining about. But like, so okay, um,
There's one.
just bear me out here. But so 55 when the pumpkin bomb goes off and MJ, looks like she's at the center of the blast. Like like let's we can roll back the tape to last week. I don't no one I At least I didn't buy that she was dead or even near dead. You know what I mean? Like I just was like, wow, they gave us a little scare, but like I mean she's even saying, "Oh, it's going to take more than that to get me, Tiger." You know what I mean? Like it seemed pretty clear like that it was not a fatal blow, even if it looked like a serious blow. But like I guess that's the thing. It's like we went from, okay, is she dead? No, she's not dead, but she could be really badly hurt, and that's going to elevate the tension here to what turned out to be the case here, which was like the whole thing was part of the ruse. Like MJ was, this was something that MJ and Norman orchestrated in, their limo ride, where MJ was going to be the diversion, and that Norman was going to be throwing these flash grenades that had no physical impacts on MJ here, and like so much so that like again we get very little Peter in this issue, so this is like some of the few scenes that we get with him, and it's like basically MJ being like, yeah, I'm cool, but just play along, Tiger. And it's just, I don't know, to me like it just totally it felt cheap. Like it really just eliminated any of the stakes or the risk here. It's, I don't know, like I guess there's still technically a risk that MJ could have been harmed by Kindred if things went awry. I don't know, but like I like it just felt too much of a swerve to make, I don't, like boy who cries wolf, maybe. I don't know. Like am I making any sense, Dan? I mean, did this kind of annoy you the way it seems to be annoying me, or am I just overreacting to this?
I don't know that it annoyed me to that level, but another thing about it annoyed me, which was like we are experiencing this scene through a flashback, not in the moment, and we
Right.
cut from like before this moment to like after this scene has already been completed. And for someone that's like hanging on that cliffhanger from the previous issue to then get to this issue and have be like, that was already resolved, here's what happened, really removes the kind of in the moment urgency of it. And then you've got this kind of reveal that it was all a fake out anyway. And my real problem is that like there's no consequences to this previous story. Like Kindred he seems, it's like Thanos until Infinity War. Like, why were we supposed to be afraid of Thanos? He's had no victories, right? Like, what has Kindred done tangibly to like suggest that he's an actual threat? I mean, yes, he killed Spider-Man and resurrected him a bunch of times, but these books really operate on, sometimes your hero getting killed, like say Superior Spider-Man, and sometimes they're being harmed or real threat being brought to our supporting cast. And when Kindred is just kind of like quickly ushered off the stage, and this big climax, what was really seemingly advertised as the climax of this story, and the stakes were raised really high. Everybody's there's dead bodies everywhere, Kindred is killing Peter, the city is being destroyed, MJ's walking in here, we're like, something is bound to happen, and then just kind of have it be like ended on like a ruse, and everybody kind of whisked off or captured. To me, it was like you had one shot at getting me really riled up, and the MJ thing seemed like a consequence in some way. Especially with the themes that have been building in this book about Spider-Man's anxiety, about how it worries how he worries about the loved ones in his life and his trouble with kind of letting them go, and MJ's kind of awakening into becoming a self-sufficient character who has kind of let her worry for Peter go as well. I just think there was a real opportunity to like do something here, but I did really like the sequence that follows this moment where Peter is like, I have to go save all these other people, and MJ is like, fine, I'm not like she doesn't, and she kisses him, and she's like, it was just good to see you. And to me, that was an evolution for the character, at least based on how she's been written since the One More Day era and Brand New Day, that kind of mischaracterized her as this kind of like worrywart nag of Spider-Man's, whereas like here her journey seems to be somewhat complete, that in the moment she can allow that Peter could get hurt, but she's just there to champion him. And I thought it was a nice little moment.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I feel it still was kind of wasted in the fact that we really never saw much from Peter after, you know what I mean? Like it just like, I mean, it wasn't even just page count, but like this comic just had no presence of Peter anywhere, like, and I think that's disappointing. I mean, like there are issues where sometimes we focus on some of the other characters, but kind of like the it's not the Bechdel test, it's the Spider-Man Bechdel test. Maybe it's like I always kind of feel like in those books you need to kind of like, if there are characters that are doing things and independently and Spider-Man isn't there, we still need to be knowing why are they doing this because of Spider-Man. And I feel like this was the Amazing Osborn family issue. You know what I mean? Like it really felt like at the end of the day, this was about Norman and Harry and kind of Peter. Like I know that Kindred kept invoking Peter, but like it just felt very tacked on and loose to that. So like, yeah, I get like that moment with Peter and MJ was very nice, but like I would have again have liked to see within this issue more of a culmination of that, like Spider-Man's busted. I don't know. But I wanted a Spider-Man moment to come from that moment, and we didn't get it. Maybe we'll get it next issue. I don't know, but like, it felt kind of hollow after the fact. I don't know.
I also just didn't understand MJ's role in that sequence, like sending her in as an actress to get like fake blown up by something. What does that gain? Like, I guess it could enrage Kindred in some way, but like, what did it gain for Norman's plan? You know what I mean? Like, I just didn't at the end of the day, I didn't understand what the plan ultimately was. Like, just to go in and get Kindred angry and then zap him up with the spot. Like, why couldn't they have done that remotely? I don't know. Maybe I missed something, but it just kind of seemed like I didn't understand the stakes of that individual scene.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with any of that. Just to kind of push forward here, we did get some check-ins on some other seemingly forgotten characters from earlier in this arc, including Overdrive and Carly Cooper, who are now an item. Dan, do you ship Carly and Overdrive?
I mean, sure. I mean, to me, this is another one of those like Nick Spencer doing service to his own characters kind of thing. Although he didn't create Overdrive, he kind of heavily featured him.
Yes.
Like, do I care about Overdrive? No, not really. Do I care about Carly Cooper? No, not really. Although I like her more than most people. Is this an interesting storyline? Not really. Although it's kind of nice to see Overdrive's kind of arc come full circle. That like he always wanted to be a hero and ended up going down the path to villainy. But at the same time, like, I don't really buy that Carly Cooper would date this guy. Like, I get that he makes this nice speech to her, but if you remember, like, Carly Cooper like held her father, this detective, in like very high esteem. She looked up to her father until she found out that he was like crooked, just like everybody else, and or all the other cops. And and she just really had a lot of like distrust in people, which also fed into her leaving Peter. Was that like, he was just like her father, was living a second life, behind her back. And I don't know that she would give a supervillain that chance, but I don't know. I mean, we'll see where it goes. I'm not offended by it in any way, nor am I like, I gotta read a miniseries about Carly and Overdrive dating.
Coming in 2022.
Yeah.
Also, speaking of characters dating superior foes, we check in on Aunt May and Randy Robertson at the new Feast headquarters. Randy keeps kind of alluding to his well, he's trying to project it as almost like an ex-girlfriend, the Beetle. But we have not seen the breakup yet, have we?
No, and she keeps sending packages and things with like cute personalized notes to Aunt May. So it seems like at least if they're not dating, the Beetle has some unrequited love or guilt associated with their relationship in some way.
And then, of course, who comes at the doorstep of Feast? But as you alluded to earlier in this episode, we got the return of the cured Martin Lee.
Yeah, I mean, this is somewhat interesting. I mean, I don't think that this fit in naturally to the storyline more than I think maybe Nick Spencer
No.
saw an opportunity to do something with this character and was like, well, let's just put it in here and maybe I can do a story with Mr. Negative later. I think Mr. Negative has kind of been a broken character for a while. I think his initial characterization was really interesting. This idea of this guy that had no idea that there was this other side to him and each one operated independent of each other. But then he just became like any other supervillain that could just like choose to switch between the two, or basically just eschewed the Martin Lee personality altogether. But maybe there's something interesting going on here because Martin says, help me, he's going to find me. Which, in my mind, I wonder if maybe the Mr. Negative personality has become separated from him in some way, has become its own kind of personification, this like sinful version of him, or if he's worried about it taking over his body. Like maybe there's an opportunity for Martin Lee to do something interesting again.
Yeah, I mean, certainly both this and the Overdrive and Carly stuff. I mean, this is the part of the issue that kind of feels like a what do you call it? Like a Fallout issue,
Right, a
Because
proper
like I feel
fallout.
like
Yeah.
yeah, we're setting up the next batch of stories with these little scenes. So like yeah, they're kind of random, and you're like, oh yeah, I haven't really thought about Aunt May or Brandy or any of these guys in a while, but it's like it hypothetically, I mean, we could be totally wrong as we embark on the next 6 months of random stories that have nothing to do with any of this. But it seems to me that this is, Nick Spencer setting up the next few arcs of things to come here. So we'll probably get some more about Martin Lee here for sure. But I guess to kind of go back to the bow here, we do end with more Norman, Peter, and Kindred. I do want to note that for this entire issue, Kindred is basically just kind of like standing in a theoretical prison, not saying much of anything, and it's kind of like, if there's anything more emblematic of what this character has been for the better part of 2 years, I think that's it, right? I mean, it's just like, just kind of talking cryptically from time to time. I mean, again, we keep talking about he now the focus is pain, right? That he wants to cause pain based on the pain that these characters have caused him and others, right?
Yeah, so like he expresses his final words from the Last Remain storyline before his self-imposed silence in the giant ice cube, black ice cube, or whatever you want to call it. And he says that he wanted to inflict pain on Peter and Norman in a way that Harry felt pain. And he said he needed to show Peter that his sanctimony and hubris was the cause of all of his friends' suffering. and that the Green Goblin, would never allow Norman to feel pain, so he needed to remove the Goblin from Norman in order to allow him to feel that pain. And that because they don't remember what they did still, even after all of that pain inflicted, only together can they figure out what it is that they need to repent for, which then I think cues Spider-Man to bust in on Norman, and he's come to talk to him, and I suspect it's about like, we got to get to the bottom of this. Like, what is it? What do we share that we've been awakened to about ourselves through this experience? Because I would say that both of them had, if there's one takeaway from Last Remains, both of them did, like what Kindred said here is true. Like, he was able to point at Peter that, like, look, you were at fault in letting my father, run rampant, even though you were relying on his amnesia. And for Norman, you are finally facing what you did as the Green Goblin. So then what's the intersection there? And I'm sure we could come up with a million things. Although, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm curious what you think about this. Do you think that there's going to be some like reason for Kindred, this thing that is revealed is something that we could go back and read between the lines about? Or do you think it's some retcon situation? Because that these characters don't remember it suggests to me that, like, maybe we as an audience haven't experienced it yet, or haven't really been shown this thing, this impact yet in a way that we can kind of tangibly latch on to.
So what you're asking is, do you feel that this is something that we've seen and versus something that we're just going to create for the purposes of this story, this thing that they don't remember? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, that could be because of like One More Day or something like that. But like,
Right.
there is something he's asking them to remember it. And, the question is he asking us as the audience to remember it too? You and I have a really significant knowledge of Spider-Man history, and I'm sure we could come up with a dozen things that it could be that these two have, done against each other that have impacted Harry specifically. But this seems to be like something really big, and that it doesn't jump out immediately suggests to me that, like, it's not just a simple reframing of a situation like the previous issue was, where it's like,
Right.
Hey, your neglect with Norman caused X and X and X. Like, I wonder if this is like some butterfly effect thing that we really haven't seen the end result of and will be revealed to us. I don't know if you have a feeling about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to pin down. I mean, like, I think part of my prediction with Kindred has always been that, he came into existence in this form based on the fact that Peter and MJ got back together. So, like you said, maybe this is some kind of like off-panel thing that happened, and I guess that's part of again where my frustration for this entire arc has come from, is that I really thought that this would be explained by now, not that we would still be speculating to a degree the way we are about it. So yeah, I guess my short answer is yeah, I don't think this is something that we have seen clearly, like we did in terms of Peter, you let Norman off the hook, and that's why he came back to haunt us all as the Goblin. But I still think it's connected to something that we saw happen. It's just like but we just don't know like the full extent of the ramifications of the thing we saw happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's where I kind of am siding. Can I ask you a question? Like, we're about to do this Roger Stern season on our show, and we're going to do a bunch of episodes on the Hobgoblin mystery, and, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Hobgoblin mystery kind of played out initially over the span of 3 or 4 years in the comic book, across the Stern and, JRJR and DeFalco Friends runs.
Yeah.
And that and then into sub books like Spider-Man, Wolverine, um, and the clues given in those books were completely insubstantial. Like especially given the resolutions. And yet there was something that, like, when reading those books, and we didn't read them in real time, you and I, right? We read them much after the fact, so it's not like we were pacing it out quite like this. And those were like an issue a month, back in that day. Do we think that we would have the same reaction to that mystery that we're having to this one? Um, given the just the length of time.
Um, it's possible. I mean, I yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the reason why, frankly, the story was resolved the way it was with the Hobgoblin, because I mean, in our interviews and stuff, I mean, it kind of revealed the fact that, like, you know, it just got to a point where people were like, enough's enough. Let's just throw anything out there. You know what I mean? Like enough with the games. Um, but and then of course when you go back, it's like, in terms of who DeFalco and friends wanted versus who Roger Stern wanted, who versus who Christopher Priest wanted, or whatever. Like, I don't know if any of these people ever really executed on setting those characters up. So I mean, yeah, I think we probably would be pissed off by it, and like, I think that's part of the reason why, frankly, why I obsessed over it and still obsess over it. It's because it's just like, you had such a captive audience and you really kind of blew it. Like, so I don't know if that answers your question, but I do feel like this is, it's probably the greatest analogy you can make in terms of both pacing and frustration from that pacing.
Yeah, I mean, I think about, like, the issue with Hobgoblin's battle van, the Amazing Spider-Man 239, where, like, the cover is Spider-Man unmasking the character on
Right.
the cover, and ultimately, yes, that happened in the book. He got the floating mask, out of the water, and we never saw the guy's
Right.
face. Like, and I think about, like, would I have been really furious, if I had read that book? And I don't really know, because, like, I think that mystery, um, we understood the stakes and we understood what the characters wanted. We were never like, it was never a mystery what the Hobgoblin wanted. We got to see full scenes of him, dealing with the underworld and getting what he wanted. And we had a rogues gallery of people that it could be. The question was, which one of them was it going to be? And I guess it
Right.
dangled it out there for a very long time and would reveal people and then unreveal them. But that was the nature of the game. I think what struggles with me in this one is we don't know why or how or what Kindred wants, and so then it's hard for us to get invested in the drama that is so far consequence free. And I think that's my ultimate disappointment with this issue. Even though I think the characterizations are really spot on, for the characters that are acting in character, um, is that I don't know, like, what people want and what the consequences of those wants are. And so, like, that's why it remains stressful. And with Spider-Man confronting Norman at the end here, I'm kind of hopeful that, like, maybe, and again, as I remain, eternally hopeful, every time we end one of these discussions, is, well, maybe next issue is the one where they can, like, figure
Right.
something out with each other. And I'm going to keep saying that so long as we're focused on the story, but I don't know how we go and tell a story about Martin Lee or Carly Cooper dating Overdrive while this Kindred thing is just hanging out there now. You already did the climax to this story in Last Remains. Like, I'm not wanting to see those other stories. Resolve this thing first.
Yeah, I agree with that. Um, just before we do grades, Stan, we really didn't touch on the art in this one.
Yeah.
It's the return to Mark Bagley. I'm not, it's probably not a fair assessment in terms of. I mean, Bagley does a fine job here. I just feel like the issue itself is fairly uninteresting in terms of a lot of the story, and like I just don't feel like Bagley had a ton to work with, and there was like really, I mean, like again, like this is no disrespect to Bagley. I think he's fantastic, but like, some of the Gleason stuff we've been getting in his issues has just been like otherworldly and just totally a revelation from a Spider-Man comic. So when you kind of go from this to, Gleason to Bagley, even though it's more about the story and giving Gleason something to work with, I don't know. Like I guess that's my very elaborate way of saying Bagley's fine, but there was nothing in this issue from a visual standpoint that made me go, "Oh wow, it's great! It's great just having Bagley here." Like it just felt very there to me.
Yeah, it doesn't have the kind of really strong visual pacing and of the first issue of the Sins Rising storyline that we commented on. I do like it more than his work on issue 53. I think the inks from Andrew Hennessy and John Dell were a lot cleaner in this issue, and so like it was easier to follow the story, and the artwork was just more handsome. But you're right, he's not really given much to do in terms of like visual moments. I guess there is one page I wanted to highlight though, and it's the one where Norman orders everybody out of the room. We had some great kind of like close-ups on Norman's face when he's talking to Kingpin and sneering and looking evil. And then the page where he kind of throws off the act of pretending to be the Green Goblin and kind of restores his kind of sane persona in this kind of silent page, I think is what Mark Bagley does kind of best, which is kind of like emotive character work that was really famous from Ultimate Spider-Man. And then there's a kind of like really neat kind of like split face page at the end where you've got Norman kind of talking about how he sees himself in Harry, and you can see his kind of like twisted goblin persona mirrored up with Kindred and Harry, and I thought that was a nice touch too. But you're right, like largely the issue is a bunch of people in a room standing around, not doing much.
Yeah.
So
in like imaginary cells and stuff, or whatever you want to call it.
And it does the design of like Harry in that kind of like dark force bubble or whatever is just kind of goofy, and so I think there probably was something a little more inventive you could do with that.
What's your grade, Dan?
Yeah, I'm gonna give this one a C plus.
Okay, and I'm gonna go C minus on this one.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Well, I should hope so. I mean, it's my opinion.
You have to adhere to my idea of your opinion, Mark.
It's a rare instance where we're not totally in lockstep, although I don't feel like we're like, totally crazy divergent here. So
no, I just really enjoyed the Norman character work, and I appreciate it when someone can fool me a little bit, and I'll go back and be like, I was overreacting last time because there was a clever swerve and not bad, cheap story writing. Like I should have figured that out. And so for that, I go, okay, I'll see you being a little clever.
Okay. Well, let's go on home, Dan, because alas, it is that time for all good things to come to an end. So we want to say thank you to you, the listeners, and those of you who are viewers for tuning into this episode of the Amazing Spider Talk.
Yeah, this episode was originally edited by Rick Coast with production support from Andy Myers. Our artwork comes handcrafted by artists Ron Friends, Sal Buscema, and Ray Sumser, and our theme songs were produced by Rylan Bojack, Tony Thaxton, and Spider Madge. This episode was originally released on Patreon as a live stream hangout with us back when the comic was first released. So, if you'd like to help us support our show's continued existence and these very reviews that you're listening to while joining us on the live stream, why not head on over to our Patreon and sign up? So, Mark, until you and I work together to remember what sin we committed in the past that has us so tormented by this unending reveal of Kindred's motivations, what is our motto?
This is pretty deep, Dan. Of course, Dan, it is. With great podcasts, there must also come the amazing Spider Talk.
Too many who know the angles, uncover and untangle all the questions and the webs left out to tangle. Be in 1962, last Wednesday's afternoon, they'll bend your ears with reckless self-abandon. The amazing Spider Talk, the amazing